Mr. Mark Selby, how are we, sir?
Very good, Mr. Matthew Gordon.
I'm glad to hear it. So you're back from your travels, bouncing around Europe. What's the mood out there?
Nickel, great actually. We're the Indonesian ore price move that we're expecting seems to be happening. So
Yeah.
good news on that front. So yeah, no, since we last talked, we had a pretty sharp move. It wasn't quite. I don't know what I was doing with my math, but we didn't quite go up a full dollar. It was about $1,500 a ton. So we retraced a little bit of that over the last 2 weeks, which often happens when you have a sharp move. But as of this morning, we're back up to 16,500, which is about a 10% gain since the start of the year. 750 a pound for those of you who are not metric. But the big thing underpinning this whole move is we've seen another big move in both ore prices in Indonesia and in Philippines last week. So Indonesia this week up $1.50 to $2 a ton over different grades. That works out to 3 to 6% increase. Philippine ore price also had a big move 2 weeks ago, which again is interesting. It's getting to the end of the rainy season there. So again, maybe things are a little bit tighter than people are expecting, which is good. And again, the other part is this ore price increase is translating into the whole ore price, NPI price, stainless steel price. So we're seeing higher prices throughout the chain. And just to give you an idea of where we are, we're at other than about 3 or 4 weeks last fall, we're at a number of these numbers are at the highest price they've been since September 2023. When nickel prices were a lot higher than they were today. So a good move higher. We'll see whether this momentum continues. But as we said at the beginning of the year, it's that if there's one number to watch for where the nickel market's headed this year, it's that Indonesian ore price. And so far, that seems to be headed in the right direction.
Okay. So there you go. That's the kind of the news from the east. And another thing I want to talk to you about. I'm coming out of the blue here. We won't prep this one at all. We're just going straight into. I had quite a few conversations this week with groups. Some of whom frame it, the market's broken. We've got to think differently, and others are going, well, actually, there's a change happening, and you got to be able to understand where the new money is going to be coming from. Your company's certainly done that. Canada Nickel has been very alternative with the financing, and several others have been. Green Revolution. The sheens come off somewhat, and we have to get back down to fundamentals. We have to get down to what the industry needs and the industry wants. Companies like yours feeding into that space. Are you seeing any support off the back of these US tariffs? Because whatever you think about Trump, and I know you do, it's definitely shaken the market up somewhat. And maybe there seems to be a difference of government interaction with these kind of green, with nickel, with copper, and all these other kind of what we used to call EV metals.
Yeah, no, for us in Canada, and in the critical mineral space, Trump is actually the best thing to come along. We've seen a bunch of government programs announced, and again, we expect to see a bunch of government money come down the pipe. But to date, there's been a lot of this and not much of this, and so. During the Ontario election campaign, which just occurred and happened a few weeks ago, the premier announced another $500 million fund for critical minerals processing. The reality of that is there's like less projects than there are on fingers on one hand, and so we should be as one of the most advanced critical minerals projects in the province. Close to the front of the list and getting the big chunk of that capital. So again, it's the new governments are all being formed right now. We're going through a federal election this fall, but once they're back, once they're settled, by the time we get to May, June, July, I think you'll see you'll really actually start to see some significant government money flow. And to underpin that, Mark Carney, who's now in the lead by a significant margin over the Conservatives. The word he used during his acceptance speech when he won the leadership of the Liberal Party, he used the word pace 6 times. We want to build a new economy. We need to build an economy that doesn't count on the United States. And he worked the word in doing that with pace 6 times. He's used it multiple times on the campaign tour. And so, for us, given the whole pipeline of projects that we have, it's quite, it's very exciting. We also, with the Conservative leader made a point of trying to say, oh, we're going to give the Ring of Fire permits in 6 months. Doesn't matter what the First Nations say. Well, First Nations took great offense. And, the natural resources minister for the country basically pointed to the fact that, why are we doing that when we've got Crawford that's got, he used 154 times, which is just the ore reserves, that you should have used nickel tons, but still made the point that we have way more nickel at Crawford. First Nations groups are all on side, all the infrastructure's there, that's a priority project. So it's nice to be highlighted in that way by the government. As I said, with Trump there, critical minerals is one of the few bargaining chips we have, and so that's going to be a key focus for governments at every level in the country going forward. So
okay, probably perhaps not being as conservative as he needs to be with his mouth. Right. Well, and the pacemaker, Carney, seems to be sort of positive and not quite picking up where Trudeau left off, and thankfully in a number of ways, but. Pace is a very kind of positive word to kind of feed into the market. Metal prices elsewhere, reactions from governments on metals, critical minerals and metals is also equally encouraging. The US is kind of, I say, setting the tone. Europe is reacting, and I think this could be a kind of strong period for metals more broadly.
Oh yeah, for sure. And even with the tariffs, the reality is, in the U.S. market, for as example, if we were producing steel today and selling, and the only place we could sell steel was into the U.S., we would be receiving a higher net back today, paying the tariff, than we would have in October, prior to prior to Trump getting elected. So that's the
reality.
That's the reality, because it's not only for materials that they depend on Canada today, you have to factor in the tariff, and then you also have to factor in the freight and financing cost from getting that from some other market, into the U.S. market. So, not surprisingly, the U.S. steel companies have all moved their prices up to take advantage of that reality. So, I think, we first talked about it, again, not, for us, we can sell our products into the U.S. and Europe. If U.S. doesn't want them, we can send everything we can make to Europe without any problems at all.
So, do you think Canada and U.S. are going to make peace at some point? I had a very angry Canadian come on this week. They said, right, I need to blur the background. I need to be able to put some image in the background. I said, well, we can't do that. He said, well, that's going to be a problem. It's going to be a real problem, because we've got this whole U.S.-Canada thing going on, and it's going to be a real problem. I said, okay, what do you want to do about that? And I said, well, you don't seem to understand the impact and the power of these U.S. tariffs. Maybe you're just not aware. Maybe Europe is not being affected, but we feel it every day. I mean, the level of impassioned delivery from this guy, he should have been more concerned with what he was wearing than the background. Was quite revealing, actually. Yeah. I didn't realize they served the level of anger. It is anger. It's actually genuinely anger.
Oh, but yeah.
Is it gonna affect actual trade? You're going to a case where actually you might be better off, but is this going to calm down anytime soon?
It will calm down at some point. I mean, to me, there's 3 points where it will. One, the U.S. consumer confidence is falling off a cliff. I'm sure we're going to see, there's going to be an inventory restock that happened in advance of these tariffs coming. There's fixed asset investment is going to really slow down in the U.S., contra to what those guys want. And so, I think the U.S. will be in recession this quarter, the next quarter, maybe dragging the whole Western world in. And so I think, point one, what sort of inflection point one, Trump, fires all these idiots he's listening to right now, and it blames it all on Biden and starts to unwind some of the stuff right away because he realizes, it's a disaster. Number two, in the midterms, if he in 2 years, less than 2 years till the midterm elections, he has a razor thin margin in the House. Yesterday, he had nominated one member of the House to run as a UN ambassador. He basically canceled that and said, no, stay in the House, because I think he's nervous he might lose that seat in a runoff election if she went into that role. Yeah, so I think the midterms, if he loses the House, then that actually allows the Democrats to put some constraints on what he's up to. And then worst case is we have to do one full term with this guy. But, again, he campaigned on lowering costs, improving the economy, blah blah, and it's all going 180 degrees in the wrong direction right now. So that marginal mix, as long as the Democrats can find somebody that has some appeal, and there are a number of candidates that could be that person, different state governors, then I think that's the third place. But again, permanent, like there'll be a shift in Canada, forever. We're not going to take that relationship for granted anymore, and we'll cozy up to Japan, Korea, and Europe in a much bigger way going forward. So
okay. Right, there we go. Better politics. On the company news front, we talked about being creative about how you go and raise capital. You're doing something unusual yourself. Royalty company or Royalty Co.
Royalty Co. Yes. So we announced with a group that we will raise $8 million comes to us. $1 million goes into the till for the royalty company. Basically, on our regional portfolio. We're putting 1% NSR on most of the properties outside of Crawford and a couple of other ones, and so this will allow us, again, give us a vehicle to be able to raise additional money. We still retain 62% of the company in that environment, and our expectation as we go through Crawford, getting it permitted, getting it financed, and getting to a final investment decision by the end of the year, that should then re-rate the rest of the projects in the portfolio. Again, we'll have published six additional resources by mid-year. So that resource package should have an endowment that starts to approach the Sudbury Basin on its own. When you toss Crawford in, it should be bigger than the Sudbury Basin. So I think a lot of people, if you step back and said, okay, if you had a chance to have a 1% royalty on most of Sudbury back in 1900, that would have been a pretty good trade. And we think, that's the upside there. Again, the low carbon footprint part of it, today's world's a little less important than it was, say, 18 months ago, 2 years ago. But, still that should attract another group of investors in terms of the focus on lower carbon, high environmental standard type deposits.
Okay, so unusual, and so not many companies do it themselves. Timing this will also be important to you. So you're not in any rush, are you, to go public?
No. With this, we're going to sit tight, keep it private. It's in a private reporting issuer, which means literally we can flip a switch and have it listed like the next day. So this gives us maximum financing flexibility going forward. So quite excited by the opportunity here, and we expect them to get closed by the end of April.
Right. Okay. And you've also appointed someone else to the board. What's she going to do for you?
Yeah. So Jackie's basically a Top Gun rated analyst, investment mind who just left BMO about a year ago. She's joined and she's working at actually a large royalty, precious metals focused royalty company, which we won't be focused on. But yeah, she was MD metals mining equity at BMO. And as well, too, she's a metallurgical engineer, started her career working at Stelco. So she actually knows actually how to make steel, which we'll be doing as well, too. So a great ad. She's a great person, great institutional investor network. And so, we're very excited that, she's only got a few limited spots for boards, and she chose to come work with us. So, I think it's a great endorsement of what we're doing, and really looking forward to having her on the board going forward.
Okay. And given her experience, I guess she's helping with the kind of Royalty Co. component. Is that? No.
She'll have to sort of keep separate for that.
Okay, understood. Right, let's talk about other company news out there. Centaurus, that we've talked about them a fair bit. What are they up to?
Yeah, so good news. They got their construction permit for their Brazilian nickel project. So again, they're one of a handful of projects that could start up before the end of the decade. So nice to see that one progress to that step. They'll be waiting for financing package. And I'm not sure, where they want to hit the button relative to the nickel market, but again, good to see that one get over the line.
Mm-hmm.
EV Nickel, so one of our neighbors in the Timmins Nickel District, they reported 6 holes from the target they're calling Gemini North. So they drilled a bunch of different targets within their land package. One of them had a little more sulfur in the system than some of the other targets. So The 6 holes, 5 very, very typical dunite grades of, either side of 0.25% nickel, the kind of stuff that we pumped out from Crawford and Reed. But, they had one hole that was 280 meters at 0.3. So, good to see some upgraded mineralization over, over some amount width. And within the intervals, a couple of the holes had some narrow, greater than 1% nickel grade. So again, it's good to see the potential for some upgrading there. So again, we're talking about the Timmins Nickel District being, the world's largest nickel sulfide district. So it's again good to see, one of our neighbors making progress on that front.
Absolutely. And what about First Atlantic Nickel?
Yeah, so they're part of the Ultramafic Club. So they've got a target out in Newfoundland. So they reported a few holes assays. So this one I think is their third hole they drilled. I think their second set of assays. Again, 0.25% nickel. As I said many times, these deposits are between 0.2 to 0.3, and about 18 meters of overburden they had to get through. So not a huge amount of overburden. They highlighted the fact that towards the bottom of the hole, grades popped up a little bit towards 0.27. So again, we'll see how that moves forward. You just need to do lots of drilling, lots of mineralogy, and so lots of met work, to see what really is there. So. They've got a ways to go. One interesting note there, First Atlantic announced a few weeks ago that they teamed up with the Colorado School of Mines to look at the hydrogen potential. So natural hydrogen, there's a few deposits globally where people, are actually, recovering hydrogen from deposits. And so the serpentinization process that creates our kind of deposit, as the rocks go through that process, they generate hydrogen as part of that chemical reaction. And so if you have something that can trap that hydrogen, there's the potential, to be able to do that. So, we'll see how that goes. Again, we've got lots of ultramafic rock, so we'll be tracking, what happens in that space for sure. And then the last piece of news is a little footnote to underscore, what just a disaster that LME trading fiasco back in March of 2022. So the LME, the London regulators fined the LME a massive, £9 million fine. Again, remember, $12 billion in trades were canceled. And the shocking statement here is that, the FCA said that only junior staff were on duty in the early hours while the market was, imploding as prices rocketed up to $100,000 a ton. So when the contract, then they couldn't get a hold of any, they didn't actually escalate it to any senior LME managers. What's even more shocking is it's not like the price was 10,000 and it went to 100. The price had already moved up pretty substantially during the daytime trading and in the prior few trading sessions. And so the fact that they weren't ready for, a potential squeeze was ridiculous. So, but again, $10 million for $12 billion in canceled trades. I know a couple traders alone who lost that much money or left that much profit on the table because they wound back the trades to another price. So
it's kind of amusing. Like I always said this back in my banking days. It's like, it's when you kind of wait for elections to kind of finish, because once you understand, what the lay of the land is, you kind of create, invent products that which will get around, circumvent, certain obstacles in the way. And like here, if you know, and this is a ridiculous signal to send out, if you know that you're only going to get a fine of that sort of level, perhaps you're not so worried about kind of getting into the detail. And I noticed that, so far, it's not like any of the traders who knew exactly what was happening will do this at this specific time, because no one will be paying attention and we'll probably get away with this thing for a bit. It beggars belief that the fines aren't bigger and they're not going after everyone involved with this one, and it's not being escalated across exchanges, because it was troubling, shall we say?
Yes.
Very troubling.
Yeah. The primary pricing vehicle for an entire, fairly
globally
working for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So
that's how easy and how delicate and fragile the system is, and looks like nothing's changed. Good. Right. On that positive note,
That's right.
good to see you. We'll see you next week. Have a great weekend, whatever you get up to.
Sounds good, sir. Take care.